Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78, talking to a pal of mine out in Elmhurst, Jeff Hoffmann. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing well, and we have never met before. I've heard about you before, and then I get pitches from people who say you should talk about this person for their story, this person for that story. Your name came up. You are out in the Elmhurst suburb of Chicago, which is a lovely suburb. They have a wonderful history museum there, which I've done some stuff with.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh, you've had an interesting life, sir. You are on your second book, but you've had like nine lives before this with the tech world, going back to school at the age, I'll let you say the age, but in your 40s, you decide to
Yeah.
go back to school to get Master of Fine Arts degree from Columbia College. So you were like the old guy, because that's what happens when you're in your 40s. All of a sudden, you're
Oh
the
yeah.
old guy.
Oh
How
yeah.
did that happen, right? I'm in my 40s. All of a sudden, I'm the old guy. But that's what happens. You're the old guy with the young kids at Columbia, and you're still playing hockey. You have, is it three children?
Two children.
Oh,
So
two children. I'm sorry.
son and
Two
daughter.
children. You're doing that. You're a father. You're a family man, and then you decided I'm going to do a book. You've done a lot of things, so I would love to talk to you about
Great. I certainly appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about it.
it. Absolutely. And so, talk about your journey as a writer first, and we'll get into the book a little bit and what inspired you. But you were in tech, and then you quit at some point to completely change to do something else, seeing using both half of your brains, as you were saying.
Yeah. I quit a lot. I think is the key thing. I right out of school, I was at Anderson Consulting for about 8 months or so before a buddy and I from college quit to start writing programs and try to find some clients that would buy them. And we that was back in '91, and
Just way
I,
before like everybody else, it seems like, was doing that kind of
uh,
stuff. You guys are way ahead of the curve there.
the nice thing about it was right when Windows was kind of nobody was really sure what to make of it, and is this fad like rock and roll and jeans, or is it going to stick around for a while? And the so a 22-year-old or 23-year-old could can convince people at that inflection point to pay them money to write some Windows programs, and so we grew a company to about 35 people, and then sold it about 8 years later, and worked for the company that bought us for a little while, and then my wife and I went and traveled for a while. We quit that job again, but quit towards we traveled internationally for about a year and 4 or 5 months.
Oh, sounds terrible.
It was it was awesome. It was a memory of
Yeah,
a lifetime, right?
I bet.
And then came back and adopted a couple kids, and was dad for a little while. Wrote a really crappy novel because I didn't know what I was doing, and sent that out a few times and didn't get any responses, and went back to work. And same partner and I bought a 35-person company, kind of picked up where we left off, and about 10 years, 10 12 years later, we sold that. And a little bit before we sold, I was 47, and I had always been a reader. I'd written that crappy novel, and wanted to really learn how to do it. So I went back to school and went to Columbia College Chicago, and kind of I'm not one of those people that can write at night while I'm writing emails and PowerPoints during the day, right? So
Sure.
really wanted to focus on it, and I treated it like a job, and took 2.5 years. I didn't really go in for with the idea that I wanted an MFA. I was using the MFA as a way to learn how to write a novel, right? And so that really kind of focused my efforts, and made me do the things that would put me towards that path.
So you talk about writing code or programs and stuff for the tech world. What did your experience at Columbia? What was like the biggest takeaway in terms of like how to write a novel? Because I imagine it's just two different components of your brain that you probably had to retrain your brain to think in a different way, to express yourself in a different way versus code, which is just is what it is, right? You got to write with emotion and visualizations and things like that.
But just in case somebody that I used to work with is listening to this, I sucked at at programming, so I quickly hired people that were good at it, and spent a lot of time, managing people and managing sales,
Got it.
and so the it wasn't like I was some sort of STEM nerd that can only think with that side of my brain. But one thing that I've just kind of realized this as I've gotten older, that and as I've gone through the writing process, that kind of empathy is at the center of it, right? Empathy is so important to put yourself into the shoes of a character, right, and into the
Hmm.
mind of a character. And empathy is really, really important when you have kids, and the special. One of my kids is special needs, so that and the empathy requirement goes up a little bit. And
Sure.
but one thing I realized as I was kind of code switching between these different worlds is that empathy was probably the my biggest strength as a manager too, and being able to ask the questions about what people wanted and put myself in their shoes and realize that they didn't know what I want, and then tried to align that with what we were trying to get done as a company. And so like that, I think if there's a muscle that I've been using throughout my adult life, I think that's maybe the one that's gotten a little bit stronger over the years.
So going to Columbia just kind of helped you realize this, work that muscle out, if you will, maybe in a different way to be able to put pen to paper, if you will, your
Yeah.
thoughts and ideas and emotions and characters that people should care about.
Well, I would say that Columbia taught me a lot, right? I don't I was answering a couple different questions at once there, but the I think really we I read there in ways that I hadn't read before, meaning that I'd always been a reader. I've read probably 1,000 or 2 novels, and but I started reading with the craft in mind, and started reading, if you would, decoding how the the authors are creating the experience that I'm reacting to, right? And having had professors that helped me decode that experience and help me understand that hey, you know what, you're having this reaction, feeling this tension, you're feeling this empathy, you're feeling this emotion, you're feeling this anger, suspense, whatever it is, because of these words and these paragraphs and these components of the book that build to the character arc, that build to the plot arc, that shift to another location or another point of view to keep that suspense in motion. So figuring out what the tools are that writers use. There is a toolkit, right? There are strategies to do it. It's not just about making up or coming up with a really great idea and writing a bunch of words, but crafting those in ways that hit in ways that people are used to, and that hit in ways that create the emotional reactions that you're looking for.
Either way, a journey nonetheless, right? To go
Oh
from something like that to another, and then
yeah.
you come up with this story, like it never happened is the name of the book, and it's about and I think everybody, to a certain degree, everybody has a story of a bunch of pals that did something stupid back in high school. Now, the varying degree of how stupid is what probably perhaps remains stories that stay in the past and forgetful, or you still talk about with your friends now and joke about. But this particular story, you pulled on some of the emotions of, I mean, I'm guessing what you were mentioning about your personal life and empathy with your one child there to develop the characters for this particular story.
Yeah, the bad thing that happens that those 18-year-olds do. The things happen in parking lots with stupid knucklehead guys, every Friday night in hundreds
Oh
of
yeah.
cities across the country, right? And I don't know where you grew up, but where I grew up, it happened on a regular basis, and never went over the line, but I saw it go close, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
I saw it go close this one time that really stuck with me, and I'm not, I didn't commit a crime. Nobody nobody that I knew did the things that were in this novel, but it stuck. That experience stuck with me in a way that I wondered what it would be like to live with that, right? And if it had gone across the line, and I wondered what it would be like to you know what are all the ways that that impacts your life, right? The novel is really centered on this, kids do bad thing, right? And then 30 years later, um, the secret that they got away with, and their relationship breaks up as they shatters as they try to figure out what to do about it, and then 30 years later they're brought back together, and somebody tries to hold them to account, right? That's that's not any story, right? And I think my personal take on it was that, that was the center, that was the uh, the the part of the novel that drives the plot forward. But the real stories for me are what happened in each of those men's life, in the intervening years, and what they're experiencing at the age of 50 when they're confronted with this call for accountability, and how it impacted all their relationships, and a lot of the point of view is from the wives of the men, some of whom don't know that, what their husband did, but know that their relationship is broken, and that there's not, they feel the vibrations of those lies and those secrets, even without knowing about them. That was interesting to explore as well.
I imagine, and I wonder if you know you take this moment that was when it happened in high school, and you cultivate a story about like what happens if it went over the line, and you've taken it with you all these years later. Have there been people in your life, even separate from high school, that you use some of their characteristics or their mannerisms? Do you incorporate that in the story of what you came out with?
You know, I it's a I'll answer that question about, how do you create characters, right? And or how do I create characters? I can't speak for everyone, right? But there are certainly, the physical characteristics. You imagine people, right? And you imagine those people based upon people sometimes. Sometimes you pull it from, a little bit further afield, and there's inevitably in the subconscious, some things captured from, people in my life, and the 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 mannerisms. But I work really hard to make, especially in this novel where there is a fair number of characters, make each character very, very distinct, and that becomes a very, very intentional process. That, it's not like I pick Jimmy from my hockey team, and that's the guy that's, I might have picked, his build and his,
Sure.
the way he laughs, but the way he relates to his family's from somewhere else, and the way he relates to his work is from somewhere else, and the way he relates to this central accountability theme is from somewhere else, and so it's a, probably a Frankenstein of tiny little bits of everything that I know.
But you get to say how that goes together because you're Dr. Frankenstein in this episode. So,
Right.
um, and you have a couple events coming up to showcase the book coming out.
Yep.
Why don't you run through those?
Yeah, sure. In Chicago, in the Chicago area, at Barbara's Bookstore in
Mhm.
Lombard, next Thursday, the March 7th. There's an event at 6:30, and then I'm buying beers for whoever shows up over at a bar nearby. So you got to come
Hey
down
now,
and find out where that bar is, right?
yeah.
And doing the same thing in St. Louis. I'm originally from St. Louis, so I'm heading home to reconnect with a bunch of people that I know from there, and
They're
hopefully
all going to ask
people
you,
join me.
dude, did you write about us? What is that?
There,
No, no, no.
right. The
Uh,
so those are two of the big events that are short term, and then there are several literary festivals throughout the country that I'm headed towards throughout the year, and started to line up some other events as well.
and where can people find out more about the journey that you're on as far as the book release parties or parties events and the literary events you were speaking of?
Yeah, the central place probably is Jeff Hoffmann Writes, and that's two N's on Hoffman. So jeffhoffmannwrites.com, and that links out to all my social, which is Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That's the easiest way to get there.
That's fantastic. And I will say, Jeff, speaking to you, I did notice the Midwest accent. I have it too, but you have a little Chicago twinge to it, which I find interesting that because you're from St. Louis or just a part of the Lou that maybe sounded a little bit like Chicago. I don't know, but it's a very you've the way you use it. I mean, I know you're not really choosing how to use it, but you know what I'm saying? Like the way you speak, it's very eloquent. I like it because it's, you have the guys that talk like this sometimes, beef sandwich, whatever, but you do it in a different way that's kind of like a radio guy in Chicago radio back in the heyday of radio. So I mean it as
That's
a
awesome.
compliment.
That's great to hear. And
Yeah,
I've been here for since '91, I guess. So I've lived here a lot longer than I lived in St. Louis, and I did live in the city for I was in one of the '78, multiple of the '78 for about 10 years, right out of school. So
well, those are formidable years.
yeah, and then my wife made me move to the suburbs. That's my excuse. So
I hear you
the
there.
rash wore off after a while, though.
So, Cubs or Cardinals?
Oh, that's I think I lost my passion as I got caught in the middle of that moving to Chicago. So I love Wrigley Field, and I have stopped arguing about baseball. So.
I hear you there too. Well said, my friend. Well said. You've had that asked before. I can tell. Well, Jeff, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you and just getting to know a little bit about your background. And congratulations on your book. I
Thank
mean,
you.
it's wonderful. We were talking off camera before. Uh, to write a book itself is not something that's very easy, and a lot of people talk about it, but the very few actually do it. So, congrats to doing it and still being a dad and a husband, and and all the things you do, and also write the book and still continue to do what you're doing now and pushing it forward. That's great.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you having me on your show.